If you know, if you let me see, where are my fellow Bible students this morning? Oh, wow, there was a lot of rain last night. But hey, guys, welcome into the live. Good morning, everybody. This is Trev from Trevessence. And as usual at this time of the morning, we are here. We are going to be reading from the book of First Samuel's. I want to say thanks to everybody who has come into the live, who all the people are coming into the live, and those who will see the live after it is over. Now, for the last few days, we have been reading the book of First Samuel. And before I say anything about what we've been reading, so for those of you who are new here, who are just discovering my channel, just coming in, I want to say a very, very special welcome to you. If you wonder what we do here first thing in the morning, each morning as we read the Bible, we are reading the Bible from the beginning to the end. That's a quest that I've taken on because, after all, the Bible is very influential in every aspect of our lives, financially, spiritually, emotionally, romantically, in every way. The Bible and its teachings have had some influence on the current laws and the current ways that we socialize and do things in this era of life. So I have taken it upon myself to read the Bible every morning, so that we can familiarize ourselves with what is in the Bible, because we have been told growing up, we have been taken to church, we have gone to church, we have been told what is in the Bible, what the Bible says, what's the Bible's perspective on every aspect of our lives, and we just go by what we are told, what the preacher told us, what our parents told us, and basically just how we were socialized into believing. And as we have done that over the years, very, very few of us have ever taken the time out to check for ourselves to see if what we were told is actually in the Bible, or was it distorted? Was the context that we were given, was it correct? We don't know. We just take it as it is and never fact checked it for ourselves. But now that is no more, because if you come on over here every morning, we will read the Bible. We will get the correct context of what's being said, why it's being said, and to whom it's being said, and who said it. And we will see whether or not those laws and precepts really have any validity in our current existence. Because who knows who is the person who is going to tell us what part of the Bible we should accept and what part we should not. Because people always tell you, go looking at the Bible, whatever the Bible says. But if I did that, I would be going against every single law that exists right now. Because the Bible particularly says, and I say this over and over, because it is one of the references of the Bible that really give me the squirms. You know, when per Moses' law, it says, if you're a dwarf, you can't enter the kingdom. If you have a big nose, you can't enter the kingdom. If your husband is fighting with somebody and you enter the fight, they're supposed to cut off your hand. The Bible really does have a lot of controversy in there. And I understand, now that I'm reading it for myself, I certainly understand why there are some people who totally and absolutely disregard the Bible And many of us may say, why? Why would somebody do that? But if you want to know why somebody would totally and blatantly disregard the Bible, you got to read the Bible for yourself. Right here, right now, I am neither saying yea nor nay. I am not endorsing any particular religion or any particular denomination. I am just reading it for myself like I would any other book. And as I'm reading it, I'm sharing my discoveries with you all. Right now, I am not sure what is happening with my StreamYard. So I'm going to switch it to a different device because this right here is okay. So if you are new here, guys, come on in. If you are just joining us, come on in and let us continue the reading for today. Well, actually, the book of Samuel, First Samuel, is actually coming to an end because we have only chapters 30 and 31 left to read. So this morning's live is going to be a little bit short because we have only those two chapters. When we come back tomorrow morning, we will begin the book of 2 Samuel. So if you have your book Bible or your Google Bible, come on in, get it out, and follow along with me as we read the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 30 and 31. 1 Samuel, chapter 30. And it came to pass when Ziklag, remember Ziklag is a place where David went, okay? And it came to pass when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burnt it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any either, great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burnt with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, you remember David's two wives now, guys, don't forget. David had two wives at this point. His first wife, Michal, who was Saul's daughter, was taken by Saul and given to another man. And now he married Abigail, who was Nabal's wife. And then he married another woman, Ahinoam, the Jezreelite. Okay? Verse 4 of chapter 30 of 1 Samuel. And verse 4 says, Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed. Imagine your two wives. That's going to be now you losing three wives. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar, the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. You know, one thing I really like about reading the Bible, you know how sometimes different people have the same name. I have noticed that during the readings, I have noticed that when the Bible is talking about somebody, they usually make reference several times. Every time their name come up, they remind you who this person is that we are talking about. So if you had read about Abiathar several chapters ago, and now you see his name again, and you don't like, who was that again? The Bible tells you. It says, Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son. And I found that in the Bible, it does that a lot, and I really appreciate that. Verse 8 says, and David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. So he went with 400, he had 600 men with him, but he went with only 400 to pursue after the enemy. And he left 200 men behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the brook Besor. And they found an Egyptian in the field. Verse 11 says, and they found an Egyptian in the field, and brought him to David, and gave him bread, and he did eat, and they made him drink water. And they gave him a piece of a cake of figs, and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. So here this Egyptian, he was starving. He hadn't eaten in 3 days and 3 nights. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink. Now they found him in the field, and they helped him. They gave him a drink and gave him something to eat. And David said unto him, excuse me, guys. And David said unto him, to whom belongest thou? You know, that's how the Bible speaks. And David said unto him, who do you belong to? And whence did you come? And where did you come from? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant of an Amalekite. And my master left me, because 3 days agone I fell sick. We made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites, and upon the coast which belongs to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb, and we burnt Ziklag with fire. So here, this must be one of the persons that David despises more than anything. Because remember, Ziklag was David's place. And this man is admitting that he was among the men who burnt Ziklag to the ground. And so here he is admitting to David that he was among them, but he had fallen ill, and his master had left him behind in the field with nothing to eat and nothing to drink. And David said to him, hold on there, guys. Let me arrange a little bit of light here. Verse 15. And David said to him, Canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, Swear unto me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening of the next day, and there escaped not one man of them, save 400 young men, which rode upon camels and fled. Oh, wow. Okay, so David, so at this point in the story, the city of Ziklag is burnt to the ground. The city of Ziklag was given to David. So now David is angry that his city is burnt down. He gathers his 600 men and he says, well, we are going after the enemy who did this. They went down to Beor, where they had he left 200 men there because he said those men were too weak. Maybe they were old and feeble and maybe had some war wounds, and he didn't think that they were strong enough to continue in battle. So he left them there and he took 400 men with him. 400 men with him to go into another battle. Now, they found this Egyptian in the field, hungry, starving, haven't eaten in 3 days, haven't drunk any water in 3 days. They fed him. Now, after they had fed him, David asked him, where are you from? Who do you belong to? Where did you come from? And the Egyptian says, well, I came here with my master. We came up and we are responsible for the burning of Ziklag and all the other destruction around here. But my master left me here because I was sick. I fell sick and my master, and they left me here. So David says, well, take me to your master. Wherever he is, whoever he is, take me there. And the young man says, I will, only if you promise not to kill me. So he takes David there. And when they got there, there is a big feast going on. They are eating and drinking and enjoying all the spoils that they had just taken out of Ziklag and the other places that they had destroyed. They had the women and children with them because they had slain all the men. And David was angry, and he and his 400 men started the rampage, and they slew everybody. The only person who escaped was the 400 young men who were able to ride away on camels. Verse 18 says, and David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. I think that was what made David even more angry about the whole situation, is that his 2 wives had been taken. And there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil, nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. And David took all the flocks and the herds, which they drove before those other cattle, and said, this is David's spoil. And David came to the 200 men, which were so faint that they could not follow David, whom they had made able to abide at the brook Besor. And they went forth to meet David, and to meet the people that were with him. And when David came near to the people, he saluted them. Then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial, of those that went with David, and said, because they were not with us, we will not give them out of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. Oh wow. Oh wow. You hear that, guys? So David and his men. So David and his men. So David and his men went down to fight these enemies who had come into Ziklag and burnt the city down and taken all the goods and everything that was of value and taken the women and the children. And David and his men went down and fought valiantly. He got his wives back. He got the children back. He got everything that was taken out of Ziklag. Plus, he got anything of value that those people had. And he brought it back. But remember, he had left those 200 men at the brook Beor because he said they were too faint to go to war. But when he got back to Beor, the other men who were with him said, these men that we had left behind, we're not going to share anything with them. They can take their wives and their children and go back to wherever their homes, wherever they came from. But we can't share the spoil with them because they weren't in the fight with us. David calls them wicked. In verse 22, then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial, of these that went with David, and said, because they were not with us, we will not give them out of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. Then said David, ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord hath given us, who hath preserved us, and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken unto you in this matter, but as his part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the staff. They shall part alike. So here, David is saying to these men that went to war with him that, listen, you can't be like that. Because these other men didn't go into the actual battle, it doesn't mean that they do not deserve any of the spoils. Their contribution was valuable as well because they stayed right here and they held the fort down. They held this border while we went into the fight. So what do you mean by they didn't do anything, so they are not going to get any of the spoils? What do you mean by that? It doesn't matter how small their contribution was to the team. They contributed. And so they deserve some of the spoils as well. And as I'm reading here, guys, I want to share with you all an experience that I had. I mean, for those of you who don't know, so I'm a nurse, and there are some things in nursing that it's a part of your job. The things you do to save others, to save a patient's life, to take care of your patient, it's part of your job. I don't know about nurses going above and beyond in everyday life, but you do for your patient. There's a limit though to the above and beyond that deserves like extra recognition. If your patient isn't feeling good today about themselves because they're usually wearing a wig, but they forgot their wig, and you say, okay, I'll call your husband, I'll call your neighbor, I'll call somebody and say, come on, bring grandma's wig, because grandma is not feeling good because she's always worn a wig and she doesn't have a wig with her. I'm fine. That is above and beyond. If grandma says, well, I've never been without my nail polish. I feel terrible today because I don't have my nail polish. And you say, okay, and you go down to the gift shop and you get a nail polish and you spend 5 minutes putting some nail polish on grandma's nail so that she feels better about herself, because for 70 years, grandma has never been seen without her nail polish. That's above and beyond. But imagine that something like saving somebody's life in a code. That's what we do. That's our job, part of our job. And imagine you doing that, and and there's a big hoopla. There's a big hoopla that the people who were doing the chest compression and establishing an airway, those people deserve some extra recognition for doing their job. But the person who was, say, writing the notes, the person who was taking care of the other patients while everybody else was at the code, is not a part of the team, didn't contribute. So those persons were not, quote unquote, recognized because they were not a part of the team. It's like the same thing here. And I've seen that in my profession, where people make a big deal about the person who was doing the CPR, the person who was doing the chest compressions, doing the airway, and administering the life-saving medication. That was the team that saved the patient's life. But the persons who were on the floor at the time, taking the other patients to the bathroom and taking care of the other patients, weren't a part of the team. Those are some of the things that bothers me in nursing. But I'm going to leave that right there right now, and we're going to continue the reading. And I brought that up just because it's the same reference here as in the Bible. Here that we are reading, where these men that went to war, went with David, these 400 men that went down with David to go fight the enemy, are of the conviction that their contribution was more valuable than the men who stayed in Beor and held that position. And David said, oh no, these men that stayed here and held this position while we went to war, their contribution to our success is just as important as our contribution. So they will partake of the spoils as well. And right here in verse 24, he says, for who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as this part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike. Both you that went down and those that stayed, everybody contributed, so everybody shall partake alike. And verse 25 says, and it was so from that day forward that he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel unto this day. And when David came to Ziklag, he sent of the spoil unto the elders of Judah. Oh, you see that? The elders. He was looking out for the elders because the elders couldn't go to war. So if you say, because I am young and I'm robust and I'm strong and I can go to war, whatever I accumulate in the war, we will not share with the elders because they couldn't go to war. And when David came to Ziklag, he sent of the spoil unto the elders of Judah, even to his friends, saying, Behold, a present for you of the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. To them which were in Bethel, and to them which were in South Ramoth, and to them which were in Jatir, and to them that were in Aurora, and to them which were in Siphmoth, and to them that were in Eshtemka, and to them which were in Rakal, and to them which were in the cities of the Jeheramelites, and to them which were in the cities of the Kenites, and to them which were in Hormah, and to them which were in Chorasham, and to them which were in Athak. Verse 31, and this is the last verse of chapter 30 of 1 Samuel. And to them which were in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were wont to haunt. He gave everybody around, he gave them some of the spoil. Verse 30, chapter 31. This is the last chapter of the book of 1 Samuel, and this is going to be the last chapter for today. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. Wow. But remember, do you all remember that when Saul had gone down to see the seer, that the seer, when the seer had awoken Samuel's spirit, and he asked Samuel what was going to happen? Remember, Samuel told him, this time tomorrow, you and your sons will be where I am, meaning they shall be in the spirit realm. So here, the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. That means somebody speared him with an arrow. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, draw thy sword, and thrust me through therein, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through, and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. So Saul in the end committed suicide. After his 3 sons had been killed by the Philistines, he was angry, he was broken, he was torn. And he knew that he could not stand up against the Philistines. And at this point, he was wounded because an arrow had caught him. So he asked his armor-bearer to take his life, but the armor-bearer wouldn't. And so Saul fell on his own sword. deliberately, because he did not want the Philistines to get victory, knowing that they had taken his life. So he took it himself. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side of Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So, oh man. So right there, after Saul and his sons and all the men that were with him were killed, the other Israelites, they ran, because they saw that the Philistines were winning the battle, so they were not going to stay and fight with the Philistines. So they ran, and with them having gone, the Philistines took over all those cities and established themselves there. Verse 8 says, "And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa." So this is where Saul died. Saul died in Mount Gilboa. Those of you who are here, remember that for the quiz on Friday. That's where Saul and his sons were killed. Let us continue. And they cut off his head. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth. Isn't Ashtaroth one of their gods? I'm going to look at that then. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. Okay, so they put Saul's head in Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. Verse 11, "And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan and came to Jabesh and burnt them there." Verse 13, and this is the last verse of chapter 31 of the book of 1 Samuel. "And they took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh and fasted there for 7 days. Wow. The Bible is like a novel, I tell you. I mean, it will take you into romance, and then it will take you into torture. It just gives you this roller coaster of emotions. And that's what made the Bible a good novel. Believe me. The stories of the Bible are just sometimes so overwhelming. You have to pause, you have to stop and absorb it. You have to stop and take it all in. You can't just read it straight along without stopping. You have to stop and read again so that you get the understanding of exactly what is going on here. You could be reading about romance. We just read about David. David had 3 wives. Not all at the same time, but he had 3 wives. For those of you who are just coming who are not aware, David was married to Michal, that was Saul's daughter. But after he had gone to war, Saul gave Michal to somebody else. And then after Nabal had died, he had taken Nabal's wife, Abigail, to be his wife. And then he took on Ahinoam as his wife as well. So David had 2 wives. There is for the romance of the story. And at the same time, there is so much bloodshed in it. Your emotions are going in and out, up and down, as you read the Bible. But in this last chapter here, this last chapter took the cake, because in this last chapter, chapter 31 of First Samuel, we saw where Saul and his sons are being slain by the Philistines in Mount Gilboa. The Philistines came and they took off Saul's head. They paraded around town, telling everybody, look, see, we were able to kill Saul and his sons and his armor bearer and the men with them. We were able to kill Saul. So they took Saul's head, because remember, Saul has been so cruel all along. Saul had developed a reputation where people hated Saul. The Philistines were his arch enemies from the beginning, but even people in Israel were concerned about Saul's behavior. So here now they took Saul's head, paraded around town, took his body and took his body and his armor, put it in their house of worship, and they were celebrating that they had been able to kill Saul, and not just Saul, but also his 3 sons. Remember, Jonathan was a warrior. Remember, Jonathan had taken on those 20 men at once and slew every last one of them. So he was a warrior. So for the enemy, the Philistines, to be able to take out Jonathan and his 2 brothers and their armor bearers and all the men at once, you know that the Lord was not on their side at that time. Because when Jonathan had taken on the 20 Philistines and had killed them all by himself, remember what he had said? He had said, "Is not the amount of people that is on your side, it is whether or not God is on your side." And he believed God was on his side. That's why he and his armor bearer at the time were able to win the battle between them and those 20 men. He said you could have 1,000,000 people going to war with just 20 people, and the 20 people win if God is on their side. So now the Philistines are really, really celebrating, because they have been able to kill Jonathan. They have been able to kill him and his brothers and their armor bearer. Saul could not bear it. He couldn't bear the fact that his 3 sons, their armor bearer, and all his men had been killed. And so he asked his armor bearer to just run this spear through me so that I may die. I do not want my enemies to get that victory, to get that satisfaction of knowing that they killed me. But the armor bearer wouldn't do it, and so Saul fell himself on his own sword and took his own life. The armor bearer couldn't bear the fact that Saul had done that to himself, and so he did the same thing to himself. And so Saul and the armor bearer both died by suicide. Now when the Philistines had come upon Saul's body, they took his head off took his head around town, showed everybody, and took his body into the house of Ashtaroth, which is their god. So it's like their church. They took his body in there so that everybody could celebrate. Now, when the other Israelites heard that this is what the Philistines had done to Saul's body and his son's body and his armor bearer, they were like, no, we cannot have that. We can't have our enemies take the body of our king. This is like how the military says, leave no man behind. You know, the military says, leave no man behind. So whether or not you are, if they capture you on the battlefield, if the enemy captures you on the battlefield, your comrades are going to try to find you. If you are wounded, they're not leaving you behind. If you are dead, they are not letting the enemy take hold of your body. And so here it was. I tell you that everything that we do these days, all the laws and all the rules have some biblical foundation to them. Because here in the Bible, the Israelites would not allow the Philistines to keep Saul's body, not even the dead body. They would not allow the Philistines, the enemies, to keep. And so they went with their armor and all, and they took Saul's body, and they took custody of it. They took custody of the bodies of his sons and his armor bearers, and they took them to Jabesh. And under a tree, they burnt them. And verse 13 says, and they took their bones and buried them under a tree in Jabesh, and they fasted there for 7 days. So in death, Saul and his sons were brought back to Israel, brought back to Jerusalem to be buried. Okay, that is the end of today's reading. I hope you all enjoyed the reading as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the chat. I sincerely appreciate you all. I want to say thanks to those of you who are silent listeners who stayed on the fringes and listened. I sincerely appreciate you. And I hope that you all are following along as we read the Bible. We are on our quest to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And we are not doing this haphazardly. We are doing it chapter by chapter, book by book. And so I want you all to stay with me as we continue doing this every morning. And that's going to be it from me for this morning, my friends. Until the next time. This is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Now have yourselves a great day, everybody.